The scream pierced through our quiet suburban evening like a knife. Terrorist. Terrorist in our neighborhood. I dropped my coffee mug as I rushed to the window. There was Margaret Sullivan, our HOA president, standing in her perfectly manicured front yard, pointing dramatically at our house while screaming into her phone. Her voice carried that particular mix of hysteria and self-righteousness that only a true Karen could achieve. 911? Yes, I need FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, everyone. My neighbor just returned from Gaza with weapons. This was about to become the biggest mistake of Margaret's life. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. Let me back up 6 hours. Friday evening, 4:30 p.m. I was debugging code in my home office when the familiar sound of a taxi pulling up made me look outside. My wife Elena was stepping out, looking exhausted. 3 weeks in Gaza had clearly taken its toll. She wore all black tactical pants, boots, and a jacket that had seen better days. Her usually perfect brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she moved with the careful precision of someone who'd been in dangerous places. But it was the luggage that caught my attention. 2 hardshell cases with official-looking tags, and that distinctive diplomatic seal I'd seen before but never really questioned. "Baby, you're home," I called out, jogging down our front steps. Elena's response wasn't what I expected. Instead of her usual warm smile, she held up one finger, the universal wait signal, while scanning our street with the intensity of a security professional. Her eyes moved systematically, parked cars, windows, shadows between houses. "Clear," she whispered to herself, then finally looked at me. "Hey babe, help me with these cases. Quick." As I grabbed the smaller case, I noticed it was surprisingly heavy. "Jesus, what's in here?" "Rocks." "Samples," she said curtly, already moving toward our front door. "We need to get inside. Now." That's when I saw Margaret Sullivan across the street, pretending to water her already drowning petunias while obviously filming us with her phone. Margaret had been our neighborhood's self-appointed security chief for the past 2 years, ever since her sister got scammed by some fake military contractor. The woman kept detailed files on everyone. I'm talking spreadsheets, photo surveillance, the works. She treated our suburban cul-de-sac like it was the Pentagon. And now she was focused on Elena. Inside our house, Elena disappeared into her office and locked the door. Through the thin walls, I could hear fragments of what sounded like a debrief call. "Package secured. Affirmative. 3 devices neutralized. Civilian area clear. Uploading intel now." When she emerged 20 minutes later, she changed into her favorite pajamas, the ones with little unicorns on them. The contrast was jarring. This was the woman I knew, not the tactical operator who just walked through our door. "How was the humanitarian work?" I asked, settling next to her on the couch. "Complicated," she said, pulling her knees up. "Really complicated. Marcus, if anyone asks, especially nosy neighbors, I was doing medical consulting in Turkey, okay? Not Gaza." "Why Turkey?" "Because Turkey doesn't make people think of terrorists and bombs." She rubbed her temples. "Some places just trigger people, you know?" I was about to ask more when Elena's personal phone buzzed. Then her work phone. Then a third phone I didn't even know she owned. All simultaneously. "Shit," she muttered, checking each device. "I need to take these. Give me 10 minutes?" She vanished back into her office, leaving me alone with my growing list of questions. Elena had always been cagey about her work. Something about government IT consulting and security clearances. But 3 phones? Diplomatic luggage? This felt bigger than server maintenance. Across the street, Margaret's investigation was just getting started. Through our front window, I watched her set up what could only be described as a surveillance station on her porch. Folding table, laptop, telephoto lens camera, and enough notebooks to write a novel. Margaret Sullivan was a 52-year-old woman who'd turned paranoia into an art form. Ever since her sister Lisa got conned out of 30 grand by some guy claiming to be a disabled veteran, Margaret saw threats everywhere. She'd appointed herself the neighborhood's guardian against scams, schemes, and suspicious activity. The problem was Margaret's definition of suspicious included pretty much everything. Last month, she called the cops on our mailman because he was casing houses. The month before that, she'd reported our teenage neighbor for operating a drug ring because he mowed lawns for cash. But this time was different. This time she was convinced she'd uncovered something big. Around 6 p.m., Margaret made her first move. She marched across the street in her investigation outfit, a beige blazer with 17 pockets that she'd bought specifically for her HOA duties. In her hands was the pink notebook she called her threat assessment journal. "Marcus," she called out in that fake sweet voice that meant trouble. Could I have a quick word? I opened the front door, already dreading this conversation. Hi, Margaret. What's up? Oh, just checking on Elena. I noticed she returned from her trip today. Where did she go again? Her pen was already poised over her notebook. Turkey, I said, remembering Elena's instructions. Medical consulting work. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Funny. Because I distinctly saw Gaza tags on her luggage. Very distinctive tags. With diplomatic markings. I think you're mistaken. Marcus, I've done my research. According to my sources, diplomatic tags are only used for government operations. High-level government operations. She clicked her pen 3 times. What kind of medical consulting requires diplomatic immunity? This was escalating fast. Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Because I also noticed Elena's been gone exactly 3 weeks. Do you know what's been happening in Gaza for the past 3 weeks? According to my research, there's been significant military activity. Very significant. Margaret flipped to a page in her notebook covered with printed articles, highlighted in multiple colors. The woman had clearly been busy. I'm just looking out for our community's safety, she continued. After what happened to my sister, I won't let dangerous people operate in our neighborhood. Not on my watch. Elena's not dangerous, Margaret. She's my wife. That's exactly what they'd want you to think. Margaret's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Marcus, these people are trained to blend in. To use innocent covers. Even to marry civilians as part of their deep cover operations. The scary thing was, Margaret actually believed what she was saying. Her sister's experience had genuinely traumatized her, turning her from a regular suburban mom into a one-woman counterintelligence operation. I'm going to need to speak with Elena directly, Margaret announced. Just a few questions to clear things up. She's sleeping. The trip was exhausting. Then I'll wait. Margaret planted herself on our front porch like she was claiming territory. Take your time. I have all evening. This was not good. I needed to warn Elena, but with Margaret camped outside our door, any conversation might be overheard. I excused myself and headed to Elena's office. She was on the phone again, speaking in what sounded like Arabic. When she saw me, she quickly switched to English. Yes, sir. Understood. Thompson out. Elena, we have a problem. Margaret's outside and she's asking questions about Gaza. She saw your luggage tags. Elena's expression went cold. What kind of questions? She thinks you're some kind of operative. She mentioned diplomatic immunity and military activity. The woman's been researching you. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the calculation of someone trained to assess threats. How much does she know? Too much. And she's not leaving until she talks to you. Okay. Elena stood up, her demeanor shifting. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go outside and have a conversation with Margaret. You're going to stay inside and let me handle this. Elena, what aren't you telling me? She paused at the door, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that scared me. Not fear, but the cold professionalism of someone who dealt with much more dangerous situations than nosy neighbors. Some things are classified, Marcus. Even from you. But I promise after tonight I'll explain everything I can. Elena walked outside in her unicorn pajamas, which somehow made the whole situation more surreal. Through the window, I watched Margaret's posture change when she saw her, straightening up like a prosecutor about to cross-examine a witness. Mrs. Thompson. So good to see you. I was just asking Marcus about your recent trip to Turkey. Actually, it was Gaza, Elena said calmly. Medical humanitarian work. Very routine. Margaret's pen started moving frantically. Gaza? But that's an active conflict zone. What kind of medical work requires diplomatic status? The kind that involves coordinating with multiple international agencies to ensure safe passage of medical supplies to civilian populations, Elena replied smoothly. It's complex work, but someone has to do it. I see. And this work, it's through what organization exactly? I'm not at liberty to discuss operational details. Security protocols, you understand. Margaret's eyes lit up. Ah, security protocols. So you admit this was a security operation? I said security protocols govern how we discuss humanitarian operations in active conflict zones. It's standard procedure to protect aid workers from becoming targets. This was like watching a chess match where one player didn't know they were playing chess. Margaret thought she was uncovering a conspiracy, but Elena was managing the conversation with professional precision. Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to be direct. I have reason to believe you're not who you claim to be. I think you're involved in something that threatens our community's safety. Elena's expression didn't change. Margaret, I understand your concern. After what happened to your sister, you have every right to be cautious about unusual activity. But I assure you, I'm exactly who I claim to be, a consultant who specializes in medical logistics in crisis zones. Then you won't mind if I verify that with the appropriate authorities? I'd encourage you to do exactly that. In fact, here's the number for the State Department's Humanitarian Assistance Verification Office. They can confirm my credentials within 24 hours. Elena pulled out her phone and rattled off a number that Margaret frantically scribbled down. I had no idea if that office actually existed, but Elena delivered it with such confidence that even I almost believed it. Margaret seemed temporarily satisfied, but I could see the wheels turning. This wasn't over. After Margaret left, Elena came back inside and immediately started making phone calls. Not on her regular phone, on the mysterious third device. We have a potential OPSEC breach, civilian surveillance? Yes, sir, I know the protocols. Understood. Activating counter-surveillance measures now. When she hung up, she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully. Margaret Sullivan just became a security threat. Not to our neighborhood, to active federal operations. What are you talking about? I can't tell you everything, but what I can tell you is this. Margaret's investigation could compromise ongoing missions that are protecting American lives. Lives that are currently in danger because of what I do for work. Elena, what do you actually do for work? She sat down across from me, choosing her words carefully. I work for a federal agency that most people have heard of. My job involves preventing bad people from getting weapons that could kill Americans. Sometimes that job takes me to very dangerous places to do very dangerous things. Are you CIA? I can't answer that question. Are you FBI? I can't answer that question either. Are you? Marcus, there are questions I literally cannot answer, even to you, even in our own home. What I can tell you is that I love you, I would never do anything to put you in danger, and Margaret Sullivan is about to find out that some people shouldn't be investigated. The next morning, Margaret's investigation kicked into high gear. She'd set up what looked like a command center in her garage, multiple laptops, printed photos of our house, maps, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. She'd also recruited help. Kevin, her 19-year-old nephew who was studying computer science, had been enlisted as her technical specialist. The kid clearly had no idea what he was getting into. Aunt Margaret, this seems kind of crazy, I could hear Kevin saying as they set up their equipment. She's just a consultant. That's what they want you to think, Kevin. According to my research, deep cover operatives always use mundane cover stories. IT consulting is perfect, it explains irregular schedules, travel, security clearances, everything. But you don't actually have proof. I have circumstantial evidence. Lots of it. And if I'm right, we could be living next to a terrorist or a spy or worse. Margaret had printed out Elena's LinkedIn profile, public social media posts, property records, even our marriage certificate. She'd cross-referenced Elena's travel dates with international incidents, looking for patterns. The terrifying part was Margaret was smart. Paranoid and obsessive, but smart. If Elena really was involved in classified work, Margaret might actually uncover something that could be dangerous. Around noon, Margaret made her first major mistake. She called the State Department number Elena had given her. Yes, hello, I'd like to verify the credentials of Elena Thompson, humanitarian consultant, Gaza operations. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Margaret's expression change from confident to confused to suspicious. No record? Are you sure? Could you check again? HOMPSON? What do you mean no such office? Margaret hung up and immediately started typing furiously on her laptop. Within minutes, she discovered that the Humanitarian Assistance Verification Office didn't exist. Kevin, I was right. She gave me a fake number. This proves she's lying. Maybe she just got the number wrong? Kevin suggested weakly. No, this was deliberate misdirection. Classic intelligence operative behavior. According to my research, this is exactly what trained operatives do when civilians get too close to the truth. Margaret's investigation was about to become a lot more dangerous for everyone involved. That afternoon, Elena came home early from work. She was carrying a small black briefcase that I'd never seen before, and she moved through our house like she was conducting a security sweep. Marcus, we need to talk, she said, setting the briefcase on our kitchen table. Margaret's investigation just triggered some alarms. What kind of alarms? The kind that mean we're about to have visitors. Elena's phone buzzed with a text. In fact, they're here now. A black sedan had pulled up across the street. Two men in suits got out and walked directly to Margaret's house. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Margaret's body language change from confident to nervous to terrified in about 30 seconds. Who are they? I asked. Colleagues. They're explaining to Margaret that her investigation needs to stop. Immediately. Are they threatening her? They're educating her about the legal consequences of interfering with federal operations. Very different thing. After 5 minutes, the men got back in their car and drove away. Margaret stood in her doorway looking like she'd seen a ghost. But instead of backing down, she did something I didn't expect. She called 911. Yes, I need to report intimidation by federal agents. Yes, real agents. They just threatened me for investigating suspicious activity in my neighborhood. Elena's expression went grim. She just escalated this beyond anything I can control. What does that mean? It means Margaret Sullivan just painted a target on herself. And possibly on us. That evening, Margaret went live on her neighborhood Facebook group. She had 200 members, basically everyone within a 3-block radius. Neighbors, I'm coming to you tonight because I believe we're all in danger. I have evidence that Elena Thompson, who lives at 248 Oak Street, is not who she claims to be. Margaret had prepared a PowerPoint presentation like she was briefing the Pentagon. She documented Elena's travel patterns, photographed our house from multiple angles, and compiled what she called intelligence reports on our daily routines. This woman claims to be a medical consultant, but today I discovered she gave me fake contact information for verifying her credentials. When I tried to investigate further, I was visited by federal agents who tried to intimidate me into stopping my research. The comments section exploded. Some neighbors thought Margaret had finally lost it, but others were genuinely concerned. When federal agents start showing up in suburban neighborhoods, people pay attention. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night. I encourage everyone to attend. Our community's safety may depend on it. Elena watched the live stream with the cold focus of someone analyzing intelligence. She's good, she admitted. Paranoid and wrong about almost everything, but she's presenting her case effectively. What happens now? Now I have to decide how much of my real identity to reveal to neutralize this threat without compromising ongoing operations. Elena, who do you really work for? She was quiet for a long moment. FBI Counterterrorism Division. I've been undercover for 8 years, using medical consulting as my cover identity. What I do involves infiltrating terrorist networks, tracking weapons trafficking, and preventing attacks on American soil. Holy shit. The Gaza operation was real. We intercepted a weapons shipment that would have been used against civilian targets. 3 weeks of very dangerous work that potentially saved hundreds of lives. And Margaret's investigation? Could expose not just me but other operatives currently in the field. People whose lives depend on their cover identities remaining intact. So what do we do? Elena opened the black briefcase. Inside was an FBI badge, a service weapon, and credentials that looked very official and very intimidating. Tomorrow night at that HOA meeting, Margaret Sullivan is going to learn exactly who she's been investigating. The next evening, Margaret's garage was packed. 50 neighbors had shown up for what she'd billed as a community safety emergency meeting. She'd set up a projector, printed handouts, and even provided coffee and cookies like this was a PDA meeting instead of a conspiracy theory convention. Thank you all for coming, Margaret began, standing behind a podium she'd borrowed from the church. What I'm about to share with you will shock and alarm you, but I believe you have a right to know the truth about what's happening in our neighborhood. Margaret's presentation was actually impressive. She documented 3 weeks of Elena's absence, correlated it with international news reports from Gaza, photographed our house at different times of day, and compiled what looked like a legitimate intelligence report. This woman has been living among us under false pretenses. Her story about medical consulting doesn't add up. Her credentials are fake. And when I tried to investigate, federal agents threatened me. Bob Martinez, a retired Marine who lived 2 houses down, raised his hand. Margaret, even if you're right, what exactly are you suggesting we do about it? I'm suggesting we demand answers. Real answers. And if we don't get them, I think we should contact the media and law enforcement. That's when Elena walked in. She wasn't wearing her unicorn pajamas this time. She was dressed in a dark suit, her hair pulled back professionally, and she carried herself with an authority that made the room go quiet. Good evening, everyone. My name is Special Agent Elena Thompson, FBI Counterterrorism Division. She held up her badge for everyone to see. I understand there are some questions about my recent travel and work activities. The room was dead silent. Margaret's face went through several emotions: confusion, realization, and then something that might have been panic. Mrs. Sullivan, you've been very thorough in your investigation. Almost professionally thorough. So I'm going to give you the professional courtesy of a full briefing. Elena moved to the front of the room like she owned it. 3 weeks ago, I completed an operation in Gaza that resulted in the interdiction of surface-to-air missiles destined for terrorist organizations. These weapons would have been used to shoot down civilian aircraft. The operation was successful, and hundreds of innocent lives were potentially saved. She clicked to the next slide, Margaret's projector now displaying FBI logos and what looked like classified briefing materials. My cover identity as a medical consultant allows me to operate in crisis zones without attracting the attention of hostile actors. It's an identity I've maintained for 8 years, during which time I've participated in operations that have prevented 17 terrorist attacks on American soil. Elena turned to look directly at Margaret. Mrs. Sullivan, your investigation, while impressive in its thoroughness, has compromised operational security and potentially endangered active agents in the field. Margaret found her voice. You're really FBI? I am. And you, Mrs. Sullivan, have just committed several federal crimes. Surveillance of a federal agent, interference with ongoing operations, and public disclosure of classified information. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Elena let that sink in for a moment before continuing. However, I understand your motivations. Your sister's experience with fraud has made you protective of your community. That's admirable. It's also exactly the kind of civic engagement that makes America stronger. Elena's tone shifted slightly, becoming less formal. So here's what's going to happen. This briefing is classified. Everyone in this room is now bound by federal confidentiality requirements. Mrs. Sullivan, your investigation ends tonight, but I'd like to offer you an opportunity to channel your considerable investigative skills in a more productive direction. What kind of opportunity? Margaret asked nervously. The FBI has a civilian liaison program for community leaders who demonstrate exceptional attention to detail and commitment to public safety. Interested? Margaret looked like she was having trouble processing this information. You want to recruit me? I want to redirect you. Your skills are impressive, Mrs. Sullivan. But they need to be pointed at actual threats, not federal agents trying to protect the country. Elena closed her briefcase and looked around the room. Are there any questions I can answer without violating operational security? Bob Martinez raised his hand. Agent Thompson, is our neighborhood safe? Your neighborhood is safe. The threats I work to neutralize operate on a much larger scale than suburban communities. You're in no danger from my work or my presence here. An older woman in the back raised her hand. What about Margaret? Is she in trouble? Elena looked at Margaret with something that might have been sympathy. Mrs. Sullivan made mistakes, but they came from a place of genuine concern for community safety. The FBI appreciates citizens who are vigilant about potential threats. We just need that vigilance to be properly channeled. After the meeting, as neighbors filed out looking shell-shocked, Margaret approached Elena with obvious nervousness. Agent Thompson, I owe you an apology. After what happened to my sister. Mrs. Sullivan, you don't need to apologize for protecting your community. You need to apologize for the methods you used. Surveillance, harassment, interference with federal operations, these are serious crimes. Am I going to be arrested? Elena considered this. That depends on what happens next. If you can redirect your considerable energy toward actual community safety issues, and if you can keep tonight's briefing confidential, then we can consider this a learning experience. And the liaison program? Is that real? It's real. The FBI works with civilian volunteers on community safety initiatives. It's not exciting spy work, it's mostly education and awareness programs. But it's legitimate and it's needed. Margaret seemed to be processing this information carefully. What would I have to do? Training, background check, psychological evaluation, and a commitment to work within proper channels instead of conducting unauthorized investigations. I think I'd like that. I want to help, Agent Thompson. I just want to help the right way. Elena nodded. Then we'll start on Monday. But Mrs. Sullivan, Kevin cannot be involved. Your nephew is brilliant, but he's also young and impulsive. This kind of work requires maturity and discretion. After Margaret left, Elena and I walked home in silence. It wasn't until we were inside with the door closed that I finally spoke. So that really happened. That really happened. My wife is actually FBI. Your wife is actually FBI. For 8 years. For 8 years. I sat down on our couch trying to process everything. Elena, why didn't you tell me? She sat next to me taking my hand. Because the moment I told you, your life became more dangerous. Every operation I go on, every case I work, every bad guy I help put away, they all have friends who might want revenge. The less you knew, the safer you were. And now Margaret's investigation has already put you in the spotlight. There's no going back to the way things were. Is that why you married me? For cover? Elena turned to look me in the eyes. Marcus, I married you because I love you. The cover story was convenient, but the feelings were real. Are real. How much of our life has been fake? None of it. The job is what I do, not who I am. Everything between us, our relationship, our marriage, our life together, that's all real. We sat there for a while, both processing the new reality of our situation. Finally, Elena spoke again. There's something else you need to know. Margaret's investigation didn't just threaten my cover. It exposed something else. What? The reason I was really in Gaza. It wasn't just about weapons interdiction. There's a terrorist cell operating in the US, and the Gaza operation was designed to flush them out. Are you saying there are actual terrorists here? In America? I'm saying the operation worked. We've identified them and they're about to be arrested. But they've also identified me. Meaning what? Meaning Margaret's little investigation may have just painted a target on our house. Before I could respond, Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent alert. She read the message and her face went pale. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? Because 3 of the terrorists we've been tracking just went off the grid. And the last signal from their phones was 2 blocks from here. Elena was already moving, grabbing the black briefcase and pulling weapons I didn't know she owned from hidden locations around our house. Elena, what's happening? What's happening is that Margaret Sullivan's investigation just turned our quiet suburban neighborhood into an active terrorism interdiction zone. Outside, I could hear cars moving slowly down our street. Cars that didn't belong to any of our neighbors. Get your laptop and anything else you can't replace, Elena said, checking her weapon with professional efficiency. We're about to find out if Margaret Sullivan's paranoia was actually justified. She was right? About terrorists in the neighborhood. She was right about danger in the neighborhood. She just had the wrong source. Elena moved to the window and carefully looked outside. 3 vehicles. Professional surveillance pattern. These aren't random criminals, Marcus. These are the people I've been hunting for 8 months. What do they want? They want me. But they'll settle for sending a message to the FBI about what happens when you interfere with their operations. Elena's phone rang. She answered it immediately. Thompson. Yes, I see them. Negative, civilian in the house. Requesting immediate backup. Understood. She hung up and turned to me. Federal response team is 10 minutes out. We need to stay alive for 10 minutes. Elena, I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Now listen carefully, we're going to move to the basement. It's reinforced and has a secure communication line. Once we're down there, I can coordinate with the response team. As we moved toward the basement stairs, I could hear car doors slamming outside. Elena held her weapon ready, moving like the trained federal agent she apparently was. How many times have you done this before? I asked. This exact situation? Never. But I've been in worse spots. We made it to the basement just as the first window upstairs exploded. Elena immediately got on a secure radio I didn't know we owned. Control, this is Agent Thompson. I have hostiles breaching my residence. 1 civilian on site. Request immediate tactical support. Thompson, Bravo team is 3 minutes out. Can you hold? Affirmative. Suspects appear to be the Haddock cell we've been tracking. Confirmed. Haddock cell is armed and extremely dangerous. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Elena turned to me. Marcus, no matter what happens up there, you stay down here until federal agents come to get you. Do you understand? What about you? I'm going to do my job. Elena moved back toward the basement stairs, but I grabbed her arm. Elena, I love you. Real FBI agent or fake medical consultant, I love you. She smiled for the first time since this all started. I love you too. And Marcus? Margaret Sullivan just became the least of our problems. Elena disappeared up the stairs, leaving me alone in our basement with the sound of armed men searching our house above me. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Margaret Sullivan had been wrong about my wife being a terrorist. But she'd been absolutely right about danger coming to our neighborhood. She just never imagined that the danger would come looking for the very person she'd been investigating. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours, but eventually I heard Elena's voice calling down the stairs, "Marcus, it's over. You can come up." When I emerged from the basement, our house looked like a war zone. Windows were broken, furniture was overturned, and there were bullet holes in the walls. But Elena was standing in our living room, unharmed, talking to men in tactical gear. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine. 3 suspects in custody, no injuries on our side." "What happens now?" "Now we clean up the mess and figure out what our new normal looks like." As federal agents processed the scene, I noticed Margaret Sullivan standing in her yard, watching everything with wide eyes. When she saw me, she walked over. "Marcus, I owe you and Elena an apology. A big one." "Margaret, you couldn't have known." "No, but I could have been less aggressive about it." "Elena's a hero. She literally risked her life to protect people, and I treated her like a criminal." Elena approached us, still wearing her tactical vest. "Mrs. Sullivan, your investigation actually helped us. The attention you drew forced the terrorist cell to move prematurely. That's how we caught them." "Really? Really? Your timing was terrible, but your instincts about danger in the neighborhood were correct." Margaret looked confused. "But I thought you were the danger." "I was the solution to the danger. But I understand how that could be confusing from the outside." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Agent Thompson, about that liaison program?" "Still interested?" "More than ever. But next time I'm suspicious about someone, I'm calling you before I call 911. Elena smiled. "That's exactly what we're hoping for." 6 months later, our neighborhood had returned to something resembling normal. Elena was still FBI, but her cover was blown, so she'd been reassigned to domestic operations that didn't require deep cover identities. Margaret had completed the FBI civilian liaison training and was now the official community safety coordinator for our area. She still kept detailed files on everyone, but now she worked with proper authorities instead of conducting unauthorized investigations. The best part was watching Margaret redirect her investigative skills toward actual problems. She'd already helped solve 2 burglary cases and identified a contractor scam that was targeting elderly residents. Elena and I had also started couples therapy to work through the trust issues created by 8 years of lies about her job. It wasn't easy, but we were making progress. "You know what's funny?" Elena said one evening as we sat on our repaired front porch. "What?" "Margaret Sullivan might be the most qualified civilian investigator the FBI has ever worked with. She's thorough, persistent, and absolutely fearless. She's also completely crazy. The best investigators usually are." Across the street, Margaret was setting up what looked like another surveillance operation. But this time, it was focused on the house 2 blocks over where a new family had moved in with very expensive cars and no visible source of income. "Should we be worried?" I asked. Elena watched Margaret adjust her telephoto lens and make notes in a fresh notebook. "No," she said with a smile. "This time she's one of the good guys." As the sun set over our quiet suburban neighborhood, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. My wife was a federal agent, my neighbor was an FBI liaison, and our street had become the site of a terrorism interdiction operation. But somehow, despite everything, it still felt like home. Margaret Sullivan had been wrong about Elena being a terrorist, but she'd been right about one thing. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the neighborhood is the one you least suspect. She just never expected that person to be on our side.